The gravel crunched beneath our boots as we stepped onto the trailhead, the sound oddly loud in the stillness. It was late afternoon, the sun barely hanging above the jagged tree line, casting a gold-orange haze across the Rockies. The sky was the kind of clear that felt infinite. No haze, no clouds, just a dome of blue above cliffs and pine. Derek had said this trail was perfect, a quiet switchback path that clung to the edge of the mountains like a scar, remote and scenic. He had smiled when he suggested it, his tone almost apologetic. We'd both been tethered to our laptops too long, too many nights side by side on the couch, but a world apart. It felt good to move. The air was crisp and thin, and the scent of pine and cool stone filled my lungs. For the first mile, there was nothing but our footsteps and the quiet creak of Derek adjusting his pack straps. No other hikers, no distant conversation, not even the chirp of birds or rustle of squirrels. That was the first thing that made me feel off. Not afraid, not really, but aware. This wasn't the usual kind of quiet. It felt deeper, staged, like the woods were holding their breath. The trail twisted sharply as we ascended, the kind of switchback that offered just enough room for a person and a half. On one side, a sheer wall of gray and red rock, flecked with moss and the odd weed forcing its way through cracks. On the other, a drop. Nothing dramatic at first, just a steep slope, but the farther we climbed, the sharper that edge became. Some turns had old, weather-worn wooden posts and cables that looked more ceremonial than useful. I was just thinking how empty the trail was and how that should have felt peaceful when I heard it. Footsteps, not ours. They were uneven, scuffing against gravel, too light for someone running, but too loud for someone walking carefully. At first, I thought maybe it was an echo. The trail coiled back and forth enough that sound bounced strangely. But when I turned, my chest tightened. There was a man, maybe 20 paces behind us. He wasn't wearing shoes. That was the first detail that didn't sit right. Bare feet, white and clean, pressed into the gravel path like it was soft earth. No socks, no buck. His skin looked pale, not in the way of a person who hadn't gotten sun, but in a way that made me think of winter, of cold rooms and long, windowless places. His clothes were neutral, simple, functional, but something about them seemed almost wrong. Too clean, too dry. He kept walking, eyes locked ahead, unblinking. No nod of acknowledgement, no sign of noticing us. No attempt to catch up, either. His pace was steady, mechanical. His chest rose and fell too quickly, like someone who had just sprinted, but his movements were calm, measured. I didn't say anything to Derek, just slowed a little, letting the man close the distance. Maybe he'd pass us. Maybe it was nothing. But when we stepped aside to let him go ahead, a wide curve in the trail where two people could stand shoulder to shoulder. He stopped too, just stood there, breathing hard, watching. He didn't speak, didn't look around, just stood in the trail, 20 feet behind, not moving closer, not retreating. The wind shifted slightly, and I swear I could hear his breath, wet, wheezing. It felt too loud, like it didn't belong to this quiet place. Derek glanced back, then forward, then kept walking. I followed. We didn't talk. There was no need to. The switchbacks grew tighter. At times, the trail doubled back so steeply we could look across the ravine and see where we'd been 5 minutes ago. That's when I looked again, and the man was still there. Always the same distance behind, always matching our speed. A few times, I looked away, hoping he'd vanish, that I'd imagined him. But he was always there, like a crack in the landscape. His face didn't change. Sometimes he smiled, a too wide, too bright smile that didn't reach his eyes. Other times he just stared, mouth slack, eyes glassy. A face waiting for someone to put it on. Derek started pausing at tighter curves, giving the man every opportunity to pass. But every time we stopped, he stopped. Each time we moved, so did he. There was one point where I turned back suddenly, expecting to catch him off guard. But his gaze was already locked on mine. No surprise in his expression. No tensión. Just quiet attention, like I was an animal in a zoo and he was reading the plaque on the glass. The air felt thinner. We passed a trail marker, the kind with a little wooden placard and a directional arrow. There were 2 stickers on it. One new, fresh green with the trail name, and another old, weathered into unreadability. For a second, I wondered how long this trail had existed. How many people had walked it? How many had returned? I thought about the guide Derek had shown me online, how it said this was a lightly trafficked path. I remember laughing at the phrase. Now it felt like a warning. We reached a small plateau, a flat rock outcrop where the view stretched for miles. The sky had begun to dim, that golden hour when everything turns amber and long shadows stretch across the earth. It should have been beautiful. We pretended to rest there, took off our packs, sipped water. Behind us, the man stopped again. This time he stepped forward. For a moment, I thought he was finally going to walk past. Instead, he moved ahead just a few feet, then turned around and sat down, facing us, legs crossed, hands on his knees, perfectly still, just watching. No movement, no sign of fatigue, just the weight of his gaze. The wind picked up, but he didn't flinch. Not a blink, not a shiver. I tried to look away, focused on a hawk circling above the distant peaks. But even with my eyes closed, I could feel him. Like gravity, like heat. Something in the atmosphere had changed the moment he appeared. Like a wire-pulled taut. The longer he sat, the less human he looked. Not in shape or form, but in stillness. The absence of normalcy. Like a mannequin placed in the wild. I found myself imagining that if I looked away too long, he'd vanish. Or worse, move closer without a sound. We didn't stay long, just enough to pretend we weren't afraid. When we stood, he stood. We started walking again, this time slower, more careful. Every glance back was the same. 20 paces, pale feet, breathing like he'd run a marathon. Always watching. The sun slid lower behind the cliffs, and the trail kept climbing. We stopped at a clearing where the trail widened slightly. A flat patch of rock nestled against the mountainside. A single crooked pine jutted from the stone, leaning out over the edge like it had grown tired of standing upright. Below, the land dropped away into shadowed valleys, folded in on themselves like great sleeping beasts. The air had turned cooler, and the late-day light was beginning to shift, not golden anymore, but gray. The kind of gray that crawls in quietly, soft at first, until you realize the world around you has dimmed without warning. We took off our packs again, this time more deliberate in our movements. A show, a silent invitation for him to pass us, to keep walking, to leave. I wiped at my forehead with the back of my hand and pretended I wasn't looking back every 10 seconds. The gravel crunched behind us. He approached slowly. Then he walked ahead, not far, just a few steps beyond us, then turned on his heel and sat down, cross-legged, still, facing us. Again, his back straight, hands resting lightly on his knees. He stared without blinking, without curiosity. His expression didn't seem to mean anything. It was blank, a placeholder for something else, like he was waiting for his face to be a sign of function. One moment his lips curled ever so slightly into a smile, and the next they were still. No emotion behind the movements, just shifts, like cycles. Something about the way he sat made my skin crawl. Not in an aggressive way. It wasn't threatening, not exactly, but it was wrong. Like watching someone sit at a dinner table with no food, no utensils, just sitting there, too still, waiting for something that was never coming. The silence thickened. The woods, already quiet, now felt vacuumed of air. I glanced at the trees. Not even their branches moved. The wind had died entirely. Even the clouds above seemed to have stopped. It felt like everything had been paused around us, like we were caught inside a still photograph. My thoughts spiraled, even as I kept my expression neutral. I didn't want Derek to see the panic rising, but it was there, clawing its way up, pressing into the back of my skull. Every instinct, every piece of some old, primal coding told me that whatever this was, it did not belong. That this moment should not be happening. He wasn't sweating. That was what I noticed next. We'd been hiking for over an hour. The incline steep, the sun hot, and yet the man's skin remained dry. Not flushed, not dusty. His clothing, though simple and thin, looked untouched by the trail. No rips, no criaces. His bare feet rested on the gravel, perfectly still, and the skin on them was unbroken. Not a speck of dirt, not a scratch on the rocks. It wasn't possible. This trail chewed up even the most prepared hikers. The switchbacks were sharp, the surface rough, unforgiving. Derek's boots were already scuffed. My calves ached. But this man, he looked like he'd just stepped out of clean room. Like gravity didn't apply to him the same way it did to the rest of us. I tried not to stare, but I couldn't help it. His chest rose and fell too fast, shallow breaths, ragged, yet his body showed no strain. No movement at all beyond that hollow breathing. My hands were shaking. I reached for my phone. It was something to do, a way to anchor myself to the real world. I didn't know what I was planning. Maybe take a photo, maybe just pretend to scroll through something familiar, something normal. I unlocked the screen, 70% battery. I switched to the camera app, tilted it just slightly to the side, as casually as I could. I didn't want him to see I was photographing him. I didn't want him to notice me noticing him. The screen turned black, then green, then static just for a second, and then it shut off completely. I stared at the blank screen, pressing the power button. Nothing. I held it down longer. Still nothing. The battery had been fine. I hadn't dropped it. It was warm in my hand, almost uncomfortably so, like it had overheated. But why? I nudged Derek and gestured toward his pocket. He pulled out his phone, tried to turn it on. Nothing. Not even a flicker of life. We didn't say anything. We just sat there, staring at the dead rectangles in our hands while the man across from us stared at us like he was waiting for a punchline. My heart was pounding now, hard enough that I could feel it in my ears. I thought of stupid things. Solar flares, localized EMPs, battery recalls. Anything rational. Anything not what it looked like. Because what it looked like was that he'd broken them. Just by being there. The longer I sat, the more it felt like the trail was closing in on us. The clearing that had felt so open when we arrived now felt barely wide enough for the three of us. The mountain walls seemed closer. The edge of the drop-off felt sharper. The sky, a narrow strip of gray above, seemed too low, like a lid slowly being screwed on tight. And he just sat there, watching. His eyes never left us. Not for a second. I tried to focus on the details, anything to avoid meeting his gaze. His fingers were long. Too long. Not monstrous or deformed, but something was just off. The joints too knobby. The nails too pale. They twitched once, but didn't tap or fidget. Just reset. He shifted slightly. The movement so slow, so fluid, I almost didn't notice. He leaned forward a fraction of an inch, and that was somehow worse than if he'd jumped at us. That subtle lean, like he was studying us more closely. Like we were on display. I stood abruptly. My legs didn't want to move at first, stiff from the tension of staying still for too long. Derek followed, slower. The man didn't react. No flinch. No question in his face. Just that same presence. I strapped my pack back on. My fingers fumbled with the buckles. My breath was shallow. We walked. The man didn't. Not yet. But I could feel it, like the warmth of breath on the back of the neck before you turn around and find nothing there. We didn't speak. Just put one foot in front of the other, each step feeling heavier than the last. The gravel sounded louder now, the crunch of it sharp and dry underfoot. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I knew he'd follow. He always did. The decision to turn back wasn't spoken. It didn't need to be. It passed silently between us like static electricity, like the moment you realize the air is too quiet before a storm. Derek shifted his weight, subtly adjusting his pack. I bent down, tightening a lace that didn't need tightening. We moved like we weren't in a hurry, like we hadn't just watched a barefoot stranger glitch our phones and camp out in our path like a stone-faced sentinel. The man didn't move. Not at first. We passed him slowly, our steps deliberate, as though pretending not to care would make it true. He remained seated as we drew closer, so still he could have been a sculpture. No acknowledgement. No change in his face. I could feel his gaze on me, though. That weight again. That feeling of being measured. Then behind us, the soft scrape of gravel. He was up, following. No words. No sound but that dragging gait. The same as before. No faster, no slower. No closer, but never far enough. The switchbacks now seemed sharper, more severe. With each curve, I expected to lose him, to find a stretch of trail empty and still. But each turn brought the same distance, the the same figure. Pale, silent, impossibly dry, as if untouched by the trail, untouched by the world. Our pace increased without planning to, a little faster with each step, hearts beating louder than the crunch of rock beneath our boots. I glanced back once, then again, still there. A third time, gone. The space behind us was suddenly empty. Just the trail, winding back through mist and trees. The quiet of it made my ears ring. I stopped short. Derek did too. We listened, waited, but there was nothing. Not even the phantom echo of footsteps. He was gone. Relief bloomed in my chest, sharp and bright. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. My shoulders dropped. Derek looked over at me and gave the faintest shake of his head, as if trying to dismiss it, or trying not to believe it had been anything at all. We kept going, slower this time, but not relaxed, more cautious than relieved. I tried to imagine he'd veered off at a different turn, found another path, sat back down and stayed. Maybe he was never really there to begin with. But then came the breathing, not behind us, from the trees. It was a rasp, wet guttural, like a long exhale through a clogged pipe. It pulsed in and out, slow and labored. I stopped walking. The sound wasn't coming from the path. It was above us. And below, not echoing, coming from multiple places. Different depths, different directions. Like the forest was exhaling, but only in certain spots. The trees had thickened here, leaning into the trail like curious onlookers. Their branches gnarled and bare. Too many were broken midway up the trunks, jagged edges like snapped bones. Mist curled along the undergrowth, stretching into the trail, hiding the edges of the switchback. We picked up the pace again. The trail's incline now felt steeper, though it wasn't. My calves burned. My hands clenched. Every 10 steps, I looked back. Every time, nothing. Just the trail stretching behind, empty and gray. But the breathing followed, always from the sides. Always wrong. It stopped suddenly, and that somehow made it worse. The silence returned, but it was no longer still. It was tense. A pressure, like the space around us had narrowed. I had the sense we weren't moving through the trail anymore. The trail was moving around us. We reached a tight bend in the switchback, a sharp angle that doubled back on itself, giving a clear view across the ravine to the upper portion of the trail we had just descended. A straight line of path, like a balcony across a narrow chasm. And standing there, across from us, was the man, watching. But we had just left him behind. Hadn't we? My legs locked. My breath hitched. He was motionless again. That same loose-limbed stillness, arms at his sides, eyes locked on us across the void. There was no confusion in him, no curiosity, just certainty. He had been here, or maybe he'd always been here. Then movement below, farther down the trail, around the next curve. Another figure stepped into view. The same face, the same blank stare, the same impossible stillness. There were two of them, not similar, not just alike, identical. Everything inside me went cold. The one across from us didn't move, just watched. The one below took a single step forward, like an invitation. Or a trap. Derek moved closer to me. I could feel him tense beside me. The cliff's edge now seemed too near. The trees too close. The trail too narrow to turn around without getting closer to one of them. I didn't know which was worse. The man above, silently watching from a place we had already passed, or the one below, waiting for us to come closer. Either direction now felt like a descent into something we weren't meant to see, something we couldn't unsee, somewhere behind the silence. I swore I heard the breathing start again. Faint, coming from both sides. They ran. There wasn't a signal. No glance or word or plan. Just instinct, snapping to the surface like a nerve exposed to air. They tore down the trail, boots crunching, gravel slipping beneath their steps. The switchbacks blurred into each other. Sharp lefts, sudden rights, a sickening rhythm that felt too fast, too steep. Emily's breath came ragged, mouth open, throat raw. Derek was just ahead, pack jostling violently with every stride. Neither looked back. The man above hadn't moved. Neither had the one below. They were simply there, bracketing the trail like parentheses, like a sentence left unfinished. The trees flew past. The cliffs, once majestic and awe-inspiring, now felt like walls. The air pressed in close, thick and metallic. Emily could taste it. Iron, stone, the kind of dampness that sat in your lungs like ash. Her legs screamed with every step, but she didn't stop. Not until something flickered in her peripheral vision. Something too familiar. A rock, jagged, long and narrow, split down the middle like a cracked tooth. She'd seen it before. She kept running. Another curve, another bend. A patch of loose gravel where Derek had nearly slipped earlier. Then a fallen log with bark half peeled, pale wood exposed underneath like muscle under skin. They had passed this already. The trail hadn't changed. They had come back. Her feet slowed. Her lungs heaved. Derek was still running. Then he stopped too, turned, eyes wild. His shoulders rose and fell with the same disbelief she felt rising inside. This couldn't be. The mountain didn't work like this. Paths didn't circle like this. Not like this. Emily reached for a branch, snapped it, let it fall behind her with a sharp crack. Then she knelt, dragged a rock across the nearest tree, carving a quick mark into the bark, a deep slash angled downward. The scar looked angry against the rough surface. They walked again. 10 minutes. Maybe more. The path felt steeper now, the air colder. Her ears rang. The trees blurred past, in near-identical formations. Each bend looked the same. Her footsteps grew slower. Her legs heavier. Then the mark. There it was. Same tree. Same gouge. The bark still curling where she'd broken the surface. Tom wasn't moving forward anymore. Neither were they. Something was wrong with the trail. Not just the man. Not just the silence or the cold. The mountain itself was folding in on them, curling like a fist. They sat down. There was no other choice. The outcropping wasn't as wide as before, but it offered a place to rest. Emily slumped against the rock wall, eyes scanning the trail, then the trees, then the sky. The world had dulled. No color anymore, just variations of gray, like the mountain was draining the pigment from the air. Her hands trembled. She pressed her palms into her knees, trying to feel grounded, but the ground felt like paper, thin and unconvincing. Derek didn't speak, just sat with his elbows on his thighs, staring forward, waiting for something, maybe anything. Nothing came. For a long time, there was only stillness. Then the trees moved, not dramatically, no branches cracking, no leaves fluttering, just the faintest shift in shape, like something had stepped out from behind them and the trees had subtly adjusted around it. The man emerged, closer than before, too close. He wasn't 20 paces back anymore, not 10, 5 maybe. No sound accompanied his movement, no crunch of gravel, no breath. He stood there, feet bare on stone, arms at his sides. Emily couldn't stand. Her body refused. Her legs felt distant, dreamlike, as if they didn't belong to her anymore. Her mouth opened, but no words came. The man tilted his head, just slightly, then opened his mouth. No expression, no flexing of the jaw, just the mouth, parting like a door left ajar. From within came a whisper. Not his, not a voice she didn't recognize. It was hers. The same tone, same pitch, a breathy murmur spoken hours ago, high on the trail before things went wrong. This air smells like rain. The words echoed out of his throat, but didn't match the movement of his mouth. They were replayed, hollow, like audio from a speaker submerged in water. Flat, mechanical. Emily's heart stuttered. She remembered saying it, offhand, not long after they'd started hiking. It had meant nothing at the time, just a passing observation. But now it had been taken, repeated, as if the mountain had recorded her. Or the man, or whatever he was. He hadn't blinked, not once. His mouth closed slowly, like a puppet wound down. The silence returned, but it wasn't quiet anymore. It throbbed. It hummed. Derek stood suddenly, too fast, off balance. Emily struggled to follow. Her knees buckled, but she caught herself. They backed away together, not turning their backs, not willing to break eye contact. The man didn't move, just watched, just waited. The loop wasn't just in the trail. It was in time, in space, in them. And something inside the mountain, or behind it, was listening, watching, learning. The trees broke like a curtain pulled aside, and they were suddenly free of them, stumbling out into the trailhead clearing as if surfacing from deep water. The sky had shifted again, darker now, but not with the colors of evening. It was gray without weight, pale without light, like a film had been placed over the sun. Emily's legs burned. Her chest heaved. Derek bent forward, bracing himself with both hands on his knees, his breath rasping through clenched teeth. The lot was empty, completely, unnervingly empty. No ranger vehicle, no parked cars, no hikers returning late. Just flat, cracked pavement and weeds pushing up through its seams. A single bulletin board stood to one side, warped from years of weather, glass pane shattered, but behind it, nothing. No maps, no regulations. No, you are here. Just a faded rectangle where something had never been posted. Emily's gaze dropped. Tire tracks. One set. Their own. They traced the arc of their arrival, dried in the dirt and gravel like the trail had kept their memory more clearly than the mountain itself. There were no other prints. No bodeskoofs. No pole marks. No sign that anyone else had ever stepped onto this trail. Emily's hands fumbled for her keys. They should have been in her pocket. She remembered tucking them there at the start. She remembered the weight of them, the metallic jingle, the familiar texture of the leather loop. They were gone. The car, parked crookedly at the edge of the lot, had its windows closed, but the faint reflection in the windshield flickered with something unnatural. She didn't hesitate. She yanked open the door. The keys were already in the ignition. They hadn't been left. They'd been placed. The driver's seat still held the imprint of someone sitting there. She climbed in. Derek followed, silent, expression drawn and unreadable. He stared straight ahead, hands clenching his knees. Neither spoke. Derek turned the key. The engine started, and the radio blared to life. Not music, not a broadcast, just static. And then voice. Her voice. Warbled, stretched, played back like a warped cassette. A moment replayed, not from the air, but from inside the trail. A breathy echo, barely above the hiss of static. Why doesn't he pass us? Emily's blood went cold. She had said that, hours ago, when the man first started following them. The words had slipped out low, half to herself, barely audible. But now they returned, robotic, broken, bleeding through the speakers like the trail itself was answering her. The volume dropped on its own. The static faded. Derek pressed the gas. The tires skidded briefly before gripping. The lot rolled away behind them. Emily stared out the window, knuckles white around the door handle. The road curved down, then up. Her stomach dipped. Another curve. Another incline. They should have been descending. The trailhead sat at the top of a long, winding road. But every turn seemed to climb higher. The trees thickened again. The fog returned. And when she glanced at the dashboard, she saw the altitude meter, broken, or lying. Another curve, the same pine twisted sideways over the shoulder. The same boulder split like a cracked tooth. The same half-fallen road sign, reading only the first 3 letters of a weathered warning. They weren't leaving. They were returning. Emily's hands trembled against the dashboard. The car rounded one last bend, gravel spitting under the tires, and the clearing opened once again. The same trailhead, same lot, same shattered glass on the bulletin board, same dry tire tracks. And in the middle of the lot, he stood, barefoot, smiling. The man, no space between them now. No pathis, no breathless pursuit. He had arrived before them. Emily refused to blink. Her chest tightened. The man didn't move, just stood in the exact center of the cracked pavement, like he had always belonged there. Like the trail had been a spiral leading directly to this point and no further. Derek slowed the car. Stopped. The man smiled wider. Emily turned to look out the rear window and froze. In the mirror, the back seat wasn't empty. He sat there, not a blur, not a trick of the light, not a silhouette. The man, in the rearview mirror, his eyes meeting hers through the reflection, mouth stretched into a grin too wide, teeth too small, and too many. He didn't move, didn't speak. He just was. She turned. The back seat was empty. No one there. But Derek. He was gone. The driver's seat was still warm. The keys still in the ignition, engine idling. The faint smell of sweat still hung in the air, but he was gone. Only the faintest indentation remained in the passenger seat beside her. And beside it, on the mat below, a single set of footprints. Water, damp, pressed deep into the floor mat, as though they'd been there all along.